This is a Let Freedom Ring series. And tonight we will have a presentation by Mr. Todd Byrd, a DEI administrator and a person who has for years been in the trenches, if you will, of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that looks for marginalized groups, particularly before this industry gets to what we know now as this billion-dollar industry. So from what I consider to be an impetus of what we know now as DEI, he brings a very significant amount of information and this experience about how DEI works, and inside that, the layered nuances. So tonight, he will center on microaggressions as a way to demystify white superiority. So for all of you all who have joined us, welcome, and please, particularly for our students, please sign your name in the chat with the word attendance next to it so that you get your proper attendance. And in just a minute, we're going to have a Q&R code so that you can get your SOAR badge from Black Studies, which is well on its way to becoming another space for students to become involved with social justice advocacy. So please sign in both ways. But before we properly introduce and begin to absorb the information and internalize the information from Mr. Byrd, we have a couple poll questions that we would like for you all to help us with your opinions and your thoughts. So Toby, if you could put up the poll questions, we're ready to go. So please, you all, answer the questions and help us out here. Mr. Byrd, you can chime in as well within some of these answers.
Okay.
And that in itself would be very helpful to us to have the presenter be a part of the poll. We got right around another 30 seconds. Thank you all for your help and your comments and your answers. They're very valuable to us as we want to always document. If it didn't document, didn't happen, doesn't exist. And we want to make sure this is documented because the conversation tonight is going to be very vital to the understanding of the layered nuances of what we think about when we talk about DEI, microaggressions, and those things now that become catchphrases, but they'll be very well fleshed out today by our speaker, Mr. Todd Byrd. So if you're ready, Mr. Byrd, we are so glad that you came to join us, and thank you again for your presence.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for that very generous introduction, Dr. Dixon. I would like to say before I get started, I appreciate the University of Wyoming and the Black Studies Center for allowing me an opportunity to speak with you this evening. Pardon me for not wearing a tie. It's been a long day, and so I thought it'd probably be a lot easier for us to flow if I didn't have that tie on. But again, I'd like to also compliment Professor Dixon and express my admiration, my respect for his scholarship, for his undying love for Black people and uplifting humanity. This guy has a great deal of moral integrity. He has courage, conviction, and a willingness to sacrifice himself to help others. And so if you look those principles up, you will find what we would consider a true hero, modern day hero. So let's give this brother his flowers today. You can put it in a chat or what have you, but let's give him his commendation for being such a great scholar, a great teacher, a great leader, and a great friend. Okay, so before we get started into this this presentation, which will more likely become a discussion on the topic of how microaggressions, whether they're conspicuous or subtle, how they're used as weapons of white supremacy, human degradation, and oppression. And so we'll be looking at it from a lens of the critical race theory, as well as other theories and perspective that I've studied over time. This discussion will explore the microaggressions. It would also talk about how microaggressions are used for white supremacy as a form of human degradation, exploitation, and oppression. We'll look at how that ideology of whiteness is diametrically opposed to the pursuit of freedom, justice, and humanity for marginalized as well as racialized communities, unless it's economically beneficial for the maximum exploitation. And the reason why I'm taking this approach is because I think it's important for us all to know that white supremacy, or the ideology of white supremacy, is not just a threat to Black people and people of color, it's a threat to humanity. And there's various reasons why I say that, but let me share something from this book that I have a great deal of respect for. It's called The Miner's Canary. It's written by Lanny Guinier and Gerald Torres. And it reads as such. Excuse me. Race for us is like the miner's canary. Miners often carry a canary into a mine alongside them. The canary's more fragile respiratory system would cause it to collapse from noxious gases long before humans were affected, thus alerting the miners to danger. The canary's distress signaled that it was time to get out of the mine before the air was becoming too poisonous to breathe. Are we there? My computer shut down. Okay, we're still there?
We're still here.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so for those who are racially marginalized, or like the miner's canary, their distress is the first sign of a danger that threatens us all. It's easy enough to think that when we sacrifice this canary, the only harm is to communities of color, yet others ignore problems that converge around racial minorities at their own peril. For these problems are symptoms warning us all that we're at risk. And so this topic that we chose was in theme with Martin Luther King's Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And to give you a little bit more information or a backdrop on what CRT actually is, it's really just a historical fact based on scientific research for the reality of Black people and people of color that's been oppressed, colonized, marginalized, and things like that. That crushes the notion that whiteness or the supremacy thereof, when all it takes is a natural disaster to obliterate the entire notion. Okay, so do we have the PowerPoint up, Dr. Dixon?
You need to share it?
I'd like to.
Toby, can you share it?
Should be able to if you just hit the green share screen at the bottom.
Okay, at the bottom here, it just has incoming video, stop live stream. It doesn't say anything about share video.
Toby, just hold a second. I think I can pull it up.
Okay, so we can continue. So I'd like to define what a microaggression is in order to frame this discussion. And so what I come up with is a microaggression is really just a euphemism for psychological warfare, dehumanization, and colonization. Microaggressions are generally looked upon as micro, but according to Dr. Fred Dixon, he reminded me that microaggressions are not really that micro at all. So I want us to take a deeper dive into how these inappropriate words, these snubs and condescending communication impact people, particularly people of color and people who've been marginalized here, particularly in the United States. Are we able to pull the PowerPoint up yet, sir? Okay. Can we scroll ahead, please? Okay, so the stereotype threat pretty much implies that people who are racialized or marginalized or even identified as what they would consider to be a minority, it always it imposes a threat to their inherent thinking in terms of what their abilities are in terms of being successful in what we have in the society in the United States. And so I want to go to a jump ahead and go to a video that I think that may illustrate it. So we can stop at the picture right here. When we think of white supremacy, we generally look at Ku Klux Klan. We can stop right there. We look at groups like the Ku Klux Klan, Proud Boys, and things of that nature, when that's just pretty much a spoke in the wheel of what racism actually is. But we also must identify and understand that that has a large influence on how this system is reinforced and how people to continue to support racism and white supremacy, whether they realize it or not, whether that be white people, whether that be people of color. There's a system that's been established here in the United States that actually didn't start right here in the United States. Racism goes as far back even before the identity of whiteness was even created. Whiteness was created, I think, once they had a Berlin conference when the Europeans decided to cease fire and divide up the resources out of Africa and the African nations for their benefit and for their wealth. And so after going into the mid to late 1600s, people start identifying as white based on their allyship with one another in reference to, and as it pertains to Africa and the exploitation thereof Africa. And so at some point we want to look at white supremacy and delve a little bit deeper and see what white supremacy actually is. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is what it looks like. This is what it appears in America. When you see images like this, people think white supremacy, and what they don't realize is that that's just a reinforcement of white supremacy, because white supremacy is actually a mindset. It's a mindset. If you ask Brother Malcolm X what white supremacy means, he said it means I'm boss. If you ask another person, what does white supremacy mean? It means I'm better. But that's based on what? Is it based on the economics? Is it based on the circumstances and situations that people find themselves in? Or is it a deliberate action that was designed to control and to exploit people, particularly people who aren't from an elite class? And I know we may have people who identify with white in this particular audience. And so I don't mean to be offensive, but I want you to take a deeper look, because when we came to the United States and when you arrived in the United States, you were immigrants. And the United States is comprised of a nation of immigrants. And so it really baffles me when I see the policies and the immigration policies that's taking place right now in the United States. As a matter of fact, let me take a step back and give you another quote. And you may have missed it earlier, but it's a quote by Carter G. Woodson. Carter G. Woodson, since we're on the eve of an election day, I think this will be important just in case we missed it the first time. But Carter G. Woodson said, it doesn't matter who's in office. If people doesn't learn to do for themselves, they'll be no better off in the end than they were in the beginning. So voting isn't everything. We have to take a stand against tyranny, because that's basically what we're under right now. We're under a rule of tyranny. And to sum it all up and put us all in one basket, you want to look at it as hegemony. Some people might call it hegemony. And that just means complete domination of, whether it be the banking system, whether it be the media, and the pervasive propaganda that people are that's being promoted throughout the world. Is systemic. It's systemic to keep a system in place that's continued to oppress people and continue to profit. If you look at the United States and you look at the economy in the United States, it's based on working class people. You have from 1 to the top 10% of the people, really the top 1% of the people control the whole economy in this whole world. And now we're looking at war. You can see gang wars, and you can see things that's happening in the street, and people say, well, look at them, that's black on black crime. But now we have a war that's taking place between Russia and Ukraine. And those are two European nations, and you don't hear anyone referring to it as white on white crime. So we really need to watch and look at the language that people are using to describe and to determine who people really are and who we are here in America. And I can only speak from a standpoint of being a black man who's grown up in America. I've worked in higher ed for better than 20 years. I worked in the DEI space, and I've seen quite a great deal, particularly when I worked in human resources. I'll share an experience that I've had. I've had people come to my office in tears because when people's job and their livelihood is in jeopardy, or if it's under threat for arbitrary reasons, it caused a mental crisis for people. And I've had to counsel people, make recommendation, and even advocate with administration in terms of trying to not only develop policies to improve, because just because we develop policies, we have laws and policies that's been on the book for decades, and it doesn't change the attitudes and the outlooks on that people have. And I really do think that it's the media that is more prevalent in that than anything, because it's shaping the way we look at one another. It introduced us to people before we really get to know them. And so if we could go to the next slide, please, sir. The next one. And click on, yes.
Hey, Fred, I think you'll need to reshare your screen and make sure the little box that says share sound is checked. Should be in like the bottom left corner.
Trigger warning. Okay, let's stop right there. So what we're actually witnessing here is what's been referred to as an insurrection. And if we're honest with ourselves, we, well, maybe not, but I would go as far to say that's treason. And the interesting thing about that, again, it was about election. And there were several crimes committed during that ordeal. And I truly believe that the participants haven't been held accountable. In fact, if you look at that, and we can consider it a riot, it's not a riot in terms of a race riot in the way that conspiracy theorists are spewing out there. What actually is taking place is a disagreement, and they called on our vice president to be hung. They called on a past representative from your great state to be tarred and feathered. We had a person, a congressperson whose husband was viciously attacked. And so that is still to uphold the principle or the ideology or the mindset of white supremacy. That's pretty much what that was about. And as you can see, we're all under threat. Democracy itself was under threat. People of different races and nationalities were under threat. People died during that particular ordeal just because we could make a peaceful transition. And that's one, and I think that's outright ridiculous. So again, for my diverse crowd, I want us all to understand that we're all at risk when we take these things. And again, going back to microaggressions, these microaggressions aren't micro at all. I mean, there actually is more likened into is terrorism. Let's just face it, because the impact and the effect that it has on one, whether it be physical or psychological, has long-lasting implication, and it's showing up in our society right now. The media we refer to as that toxic media because it promotes everything that's opposed to what democracy should be and what democracy is about. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. Can we go back, please? Oh, that's it. Okay. So white supremacy, this is what it really is. It's cultural hegemony. Boy, I have a hard time with that word. But basically what it is a dominance of a cultural diverse society. The ruling class is the ones who's manipulating this culture of this particular society. They influence the beliefs, the perceptions, the values, because the value system is just, there's an assigned value to pretty much everything. They can almost place a dollar value on. So I attest that that's the main thing. I think that this system believes more and has more value in money than they do humanity and people. And it's universal. It's a dominant ideology because if we look at the influence, whether it be of this toxic media or we talking about this toxic rap music, and rap is different from hip hop. Don't get it twisted, because hip hop was more about empowerment. It was about education, and it was about culture. The rap music that's being promoted today is toxic, particularly to people of color, because we have people who are being entertained, who are making millions, even billions of dollars out of the exploit of some things that I would refer to that can sometimes be senseless and mindless. Can we go to the next section, please? I have another video I'd like to get to before. Next, please. I'm moving too fast. Go back. I'm sorry, Toby. Okay. Can we go to this James Baldwin interview, the top one? I think he'll explain it a lot better. We can stop at the 2-minute mark. Need volume.
Hey, Fred, we still don't have sound. When you first hit share screen in the little window that opens up, there should be a little option you can check that says share sound down in the bottom left corner.
For Baldwin.
Now we got it.
Baldwin, take one.
White people go around, it seems to me, with a very carefully suppressed terror of black people, a tremendous uneasiness. They don't know what the blackface hides. They're sure it's hiding something. What it's hiding is American history. You know, what it's hiding is what white people know they have done and are doing. You know, it's what, you know, white people know very well one thing, and it's the only thing they have to know. If they know this, everything else I say is a lie. They know they would not like to be black here. They know that. Now they know that, and they're telling me lies. They're telling me and my children nothing but lies.
For Baldwin, the truth is that the ghettos of his youth remain, gnawing at the spirit of those who live there.
The poverty is piled high, making it even more inescapable, and making it even more inescapable how thoroughly you're despised. The high-rise slum becomes a high-crime area almost at once, because what are you going to do with all these children, really, whole families condemned forever to nothing in the richest city in the world? My best friend, a black boy, jumped off the George Washington Bridge when he was 24 and I was 22. And I was sure that I was going to be next.
Just from despair, or?
From despair, from rage, you know. Because you can get to a place, you know, where you're in battle so often that that's all you can do. You know, you've been beaten so hard. All you can do is your world narrows to a kind of red circle of rage. And you begin to hate everybody, which means you hate yourself. You know, and when that happens, it's over for you.
Okay. Okay. So what he just explained was internalized racism and how it impacts the psyche of people of color. Okay, you can go to the next one, sir. Can we go back, please? This is a slide that it's okay. So here's a quote from LBJ, our 36th United States president. If you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. And so to me, that's what white supremacy is and white supremacy does. It created this multi-billion-dollar industry that we call diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it continues to complicate and convolute the whole notion of humanity. And again, we can't say that we're standing on the ideals of the United States because we weren't included in the conception of this country, and neither were women. And so therefore, that's why we're running into so much resistance and just to be or to become. And I truly believe when you think back and you look at these negative stereotypes and these historically stereotypes and inaccuracies of these stereotypes, you'll see that whenever you find the people, you find anyone who will stand up for what's right. You have a lady, I think she's out of Pakistan, who was shot in the face, Malala, for promoting education for girls. We had a lady that was recently killed, a Muslim woman because she didn't have her hijab on correctly. And that created a ripple effect across the world. And so we must know that this inhumane treatment won't be tolerated. I mean, there's signs all around us that it will not continue to be tolerated. And I think that people are working very hard to keep this system in place, and they don't realize it's to their own demise. And so, can we go to the next slide, please? This is the type of propaganda that promotes this hate. And this is all over the place. I mean, I typed in a few keywords during a Google search, and it was things that I thought that were too ugly to review. And I didn't want to be, I wanted to be respectful, but I did want to be visual and give you an idea of what type of messages that not only we grew up on, but the messages that we're sending to our children and our grandchildren. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so, and I'm not going to go into it, but we know we have some, particularly some of our Black popular culture icons who are under fire for making comments that I wouldn't defend or deny, making comments about different systems that are in place by people. And so, with that being said, let's move forward. Let's move forward. But we have people who put out these images, and it kind of shapes and forms how you actually view a person. Now, we can go do deeper research, and we can find out what's true and what's false, and we all have a right to do that because we're scholars. We're seeking truth. This picture right here pretty much says it all. This is just a young Black male, and even growing up, you look at these things that's been associated with. So when they see us, the picture that's being painted, that when you see a young Black man, you see someone from that identifies with slavery. And people need to understand that Africa didn't breed slaves. Slaves, that was a circumstance. That was a situation. That was a transformation. They were people first. And so when you refer to our ancestors as slave, I find that condescending as well. And I think I think the media and I think people need to take that just as serious as they do when other communities are being come under assault. And I'm not saying that we should protect one over the other. I think they're all important. They're all as equally important because we're the human family. We're having a human experience, this thing called life. And I do think that it's enough information out here to advance us beyond what we're looking at right now. And so, again, let's go to the next slide. This was a sign that was on a college campus. Let's go to the next slide. These are dimensions of racism, and there's so many. And so you have institutional, you have structural, you have interpersonal, and you have internalized. Internalized is self-inflicted. Internalized racism, internalized is self-hate. Is what you see when you see self-hate come out in many shapes and forms. Let's go to the next slide, please. Again, systems of racism, a systemic racism. They all play into the system itself. You have internalized, interpersonal, structural, institutional, individual. And again, internalized racism is the cancer that's actually killing Black and people of color. Next slide, please. That's a brief description of internalized racism. It was an idea based on the psychoanalyst Frantz Fanon. He was a world-acclaimed African psychoanalyst, and he looked at the dynamics and the creation of this whiteness. And the way he explains it is that it established Blackness as an inferior. And when it's internalized, these racist attitudes internalized, you have people who desire to become, and you say desire to become white, but let's say desire to become successful, because that's what success looked like. That's what success is painted as. And so when you have someone who ascends, if you will, that's called privilege. It's called privilege. And privilege can always be revoked, and we're well aware of that. And so when this inferiority complex develops, you begin to reject your own blackness. You start looking at things and you say, well, maybe it's not the circumstance, but it is the person. You know, this bootstrap mentality. Maybe they are responsible, and we're certainly not responsible, because we're not responsible for what our forefathers did, but you benefit from it. But I don't hold that against you, simply because if they left you a check, or if they left you some money in the bank, that makes perfectly good sense. But at the same time, they left you with the responsibility to change and to look at things from a different standpoint. If they didn't, you wouldn't be in college, or you wouldn't be in this world of academia, because we're here to solve problems, from my understanding. And so some of the negative things about, the feedback that you get about blackness is things that you see out of the old comedies. You see blackface, and you see black people demeaned in every which way that you can. And so there's been some uptick in racism against some of the other representative groups. And what I've noticed is that they go on campaigns, you know, the media I'm speaking of, they go on campaigns, and, you know, it could be a Save the Well campaign. And all I'm looking for is someone, not so much to go on a campaign, but to actually get involved and engage themselves in trying to advance the work to uplift humanity, because this is what it's about. We're not appealing to anyone or to any power to accept us. We accept ourselves, and many of us need to learn to accept ourselves, because the thing is, we're looking at the value, and we're holding ourselves up to an unrealistic expectation. And again, all it takes is one natural disaster to change your whole paradigm. Go from being an empowered, a privileged person to being vulnerable, in need, social services, government, and everything. And so we need to really be mindful of that when we're looking down and looking across at others, and consider that. Consider other people. And that's the point that I'm trying to drive home. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next. A powerful message. Okay, so Jane Elliott, can you scroll down and click on her? This is an experiment that will really illustrate putting someone, no. Like if you scroll to the bottom of the Jane Elliott, you'll see like a little arrow where you can, it's a video embedded. Go down a little bit more. Try clicking on it. Oh, it's okay.
White people look vicious and ugly and non-caring and cruel and arrogant and powerful and condescending and angry. Are you angry? No. Oh, good for you. Are you angry? Trying not to be. Now, does that take a lot of energy? Yes. Yes. Are you holding it in? Yes. And are you trying really, really hard not to react to me? Yes. And are you trying really hard not to look at me? Yes. Yes. Why? Because I don't want to make myself more upset. You don't want to make yourself more upset by looking at me. Right. That takes a lot of time, a lot of energy.
So Jane Elliott, she did an experiment with our class. When I did the presentation for the for one of your undergraduate classes, we looked at one when she did one with children, and this is one with younger adults. It looked like college-age students. And what the experiment was the students who had blue eyes, they had a green collar around their neck, and they were being treated differently. And it created a great deal of distress for one student, to the point to where she got up and she walked out in protest. And the thing that struck me is that she asserted that you persecute everyone who stands up for justice. And that was based on the situation, the circumstance that they were placed in, based on that experiment. And the young lady really lashed out. She became very angry. And then Jane Elliott just kept hammering, to the point to where other students started speaking out. And so to make a long story short, it's really hard for someone to understand what it's like to walk in another person's shoes. And so early on, I read a quote by Brene Brown, and she was just talking about pretty much like what Maya Angelou, you know, when people tell you how they feel, believe them. And so it's very hard for people unless they're placed in a situation to understand what people have are going through when they're marginalized, when they're oppressed. And so I found that experiment to be very enlightening. So can we, and I'll go to the next one because we're running out of time here. This was another clip that I thought that the would benefit from. Can you hear it from my side? Hello?
In my previous discussions with service members and particularly officers, I would hear about complaints over parts not arriving on time, long deployments. And in my more recent discussions with those officers, the number one issue that they raised to me with concern, often unable to speak publicly for fear of the type of retribution that Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer faced, they say that your stand down regarding extremism did not help our military, it hurt the military.
First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders now and in the future do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets. But I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military.
Any reactions? Any reactions to that? Okay. So that was a general just giving his response to an inquiry about the CRT critical race theory. I'd like to take a pause to get some feedback or some reactions to some of the discussion that's taken place so far. Okay.
Mr. Byrd, they can't readily talk to you because of the security that's set up for us not to be Zoom bombed. They can use the chat. So anyone who has and wants to talk, please feel free to use the chat in the Q&A, which we encourage you to do. But anything outside of that is going to be very difficult.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay, well, you know, we're getting. I don't want to go over my time, but I know we're getting close to time to wrap it up. And I did have, I had a couple of, one more in particular video that I'd like to play for your audience before we close, because there are quite a few slides, and I doubt very seriously if we get through all of them. But I have one more that I think that will pretty much sum it up, and I can give my closing remarks after this next video.
What slide?
Can we scroll down? Right there. Is there any way possible that that slide will play for you? Nope. Okay. Well, I'll play it from this end, okay?
Appreciation of Carl Sagan that so many people find way overdue. Armed with 4 degrees from the University of Chicago, try that in your spare time. Sagan was an astronomer, scientist, astrophysicist, a genuine public intellectual. He taught at Harvard and Cornell and was ahead of his time almost by definition. Jason Johnson called our attention to this clip on social media today. Here is Carl Sagan on Johnny Carson, calling out a new movie called Star Wars for its faulty assumptions and lack of diversity.
Star Wars starts out saying it's on some other galaxy.
Right.
And then you see there's people. And starting in scene 1, there's a problem, because human beings are the result of a unique evolutionary sequence based upon so many individually unlikely random events on the Earth. In fact, I think most evolutionary biologists would agree that if you started the Earth out again and just let those random factors operate, you might wind up with beings that are as smart as us, and as ethical and artistic and all the rest, but they would not be human beings. That's for the Earth. So in another planet, different environment, very unlikely to have human beings.
Are you saying on another galaxy, it's not possible that there could be?
It's extremely unlikely that there would be creatures as similar to us as the dominant ones in Star Wars, and there's a whole bunch of other things. They're all white. The skin of all the humans in Star Wars, oddly enough, is sort of like this.
Right.
And not even the other colors represented on the Earth are present, much less greens and blues and purples and oranges.
They did have the scene of Star Wars with a lot of strange characters.
Yeah, but none of them seem to be in charge of the galaxy. Everybody in charge of the galaxy seemed to look like us. And I thought there was a large amount of human chauvinism. And also, I felt very bad that at the end, the Wookiee didn't get a medal also. You know, all the people got medals, and the Wookiee who had been in there fighting all the time, he didn't get any medal. And I thought that was an example of anti-Wookiee discrimination.
How about that, Carl Sagan, advocate for Wookiees everywhere? As the noted astrophysicist Ron Popeil would say, but wait, there's more. Carl Sagan could not have predicted 2021, but he did see it coming. He wrote the following back in 1995, and we quote, "I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide almost without noticing back into superstition and darkness. The dumbing down of America is most evident in the slow decay of substantive content in the enormously influential media. The 30-second sound bites now down to 10 seconds or less, lowest common denominator programming, credulous presentations on pseudoscience and superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance." Roll that around for a while. Those were among his final published words. He died 10 months later. Here we are,
Okay, so the dumbing down of America. I have a question here to say, so when we talk about different types of racism, there's a current popular video game that brags about having a politically and racially diverse cast. Despite this, it took 6 years for us to get black character who wasn't a villain Does this indicate a specific level of racism? And if not, what does tell me if a specific racial offense is institutional, systemic, interpersonal, individual, or internalized? Yeah, racism has many heads, many shapes and forms. As you can see, there were maybe about 6 to 8 introduced in those slides that we ran through earlier. So Professor can feel free to share that information if you want to take a deeper dive into it. But pretty much going back to what this last video was talking, well, to answer your question, well, I couldn't rank them because they're all a part of a system. It's like a spoke in the wheel. And so one reinforces the other. The internalized that I guess I probably pretty much emphasize because we know that it causes people a great deal of anger. And again, anger is self-harm. It's like punishing yourself for how someone feels or something that they said, which you can do nothing about. And that's the thing when we look at how we've been characterized as aimless, ignorant. I mean, come on, man. I mean, we don't have time to go into all those things. But again, Hollywood has characterized us as villains. And like you said, whether it be Denzel Washington or Halle Berry, I mean, we're recognized because that's the way they see us at our best. And that's again, diametrically opposed to who we are and who we like to be represented by. And so they give us these characters, they give us these pop figures and coaches, and they call that success. And they have our young people aspiring to be something that's demeaning and that's diminishing and that's counterproductive to not only the development and advancement of Black people themselves, but humanity. Because again, I mean, we all have to live on this planet. I mean, the way they're polluting and the way they're disregarding climate change, I mean, it's going to affect us all. It's going to affect us all. And so I think it's imperative for us to try to figure out and find a work toward improvement. We have plenty models, we have plenty examples, and many of them, I mean, I wouldn't say they didn't sign up to die to win a Nobel Peace Prize. They're just doing the work. And in some people's eyes, they make a better story. We'll talk about the death of, opposed to the life of Frederick Douglass Dixon and what he's doing to open up the minds of young scholars, because that's where the change is actually taking place. It's taking place right before our eyes. Some people are just better informed than others, but I tell you what, it's in all our best interest to try to figure out what part we can play, whether it be academia, whether it be politics, but we have to paint a different picture, and we need to stop waiting for someone else to tell our story, because there were tools and resources that were available before money was used as such. And so value yourself, each and every one of you, no matter what your race, creed, or color. And again, race, it's a made up thing. Now, if you look in the dictionary, race, it pertains to humans. Before that, it's just a competition. I like racing cars. You know, competition, I mean, that's not the healthiest competition, but there are some other things that we can do when we talk about race and competition. But I mean, it's counterproductive when we feel like, on one hand, someone must live in famine in order for someone else to feast, when there's enough resources on this planet for everyone. We're hoarding resources. We're even hoarding ideas. I mean, some of the research that we use to assist or to advance oppressed, marginalized people, even the research itself can be biased, because we're looking at, opposed to studying the group. Like I really respect a professor's approach, is that we're not a center that's studying Blacks. It's a Blacks Studies Center that promotes scholarship. We're learning about one another in order to evolve and learn how to become better human beings. Not a better Black person, not a better white person, not a better Jewish person. But in order for that to happen, we do need to be respectful. We need to be humane. And we do need to care about mankind and human beings. That's what it all boils down to. And again, the reason why there's a big push, so much of a big push for us as Black people and us Black people to others to respect us. And actually not to move out of the way, because what I'm saying is that all it takes, again, is a natural disaster to bring us all back together again. Remember 9/11? But again, even in that, someone had to be a villain. We had to villainize Muslim people now. Then, you know, there has to be an end to this. And so I'd like to stop right now and let Professor Dixon, if you have any closing remarks, if there are any questions on the table before we end.
Yeah, we got a couple questions, but before we move as we move simultaneously to the questions, Toby, can you put up the Q&R code really quickly so everybody here can scan it? And I guess a few folks have left off, which is, you know, nothing we can do about that now, but we're going to put this up for students. You got another question here from someone, an anonymous attendee. It has been mentioned several times that DEI has become a money-making industry, thus captured by cultural hegemony. What role, if any, do you think capitalism plays in the continuation of cultural hegemony and white supremacy? You want me to read it again?
Oh, yeah, please do.
Okay. It has been mentioned several times that DEI has become a money-making industry, thus captured by cultural hegemony. What role, if any, do you think capitalism plays in the continuation of cultural hegemony and white supremacy?
Okay, so back in slavery, you had the overseer. The overseer was a poor white person who didn't live much better than the slave themselves. But just for the mere fact that they were told and they were treated a little better, they went along with supporting that particular system, even though it did not benefit them. They couldn't vote if they weren't a landowner. Neither could their wife. And so I'm not quite sure in terms of, okay, so let's deal with the financial aspect. We talk about exploitation. And so say they have a holiday called Juneteenth. It's actually a Texas holiday, and it celebrates slaves in Texas being notified maybe close to 3 years later that they had been freed. And so for a long time, it wasn't talked about. As a matter of fact, we even protested that holiday when we didn't know much better. But the fact of the matter was that they started selling beer. They start advertising different things to promote. So they would make money again off of a holiday that wasn't even recognized until recently. And so there's so many different ways. I mean, if you look at the capitalistic system itself, it's about exploitation. I mean, if you look at our iPhones, for those of us who are iPhone users, and look at all of the most precious materials or resources that are needed for an iPhone come out of Africa. Or we look at these big name brand clothing, and we have these sweatshops in these other countries like China, where people are not earning a living wage and they're committing suicide and jumping out of these factory windows, and you're having people who are overworked. And so this is a society that's not specific to the United States, but it's a peculiar institution as it pertains to African Americans, because in these other instances, people are overworked and exploited and worked down to the bone, but African bodies were mutilated, you know, and I'm talking about, we have people who almost like extinct. There are nations that they refer to as tribes, but there are nations of people that no longer exist, like the dodo bird. And so what I'm saying, and the reason why things become in existence, why they do save the world, because they look at how it's going to impact the ecosystem. You know what I mean? And so money can't buy air. Money can't produce, you can't buy water. Certain things, some things are non-renewable. And again, they treat Black lives like it's organic, like it's going back to the earth. It's okay, we can get some more. And so what I'm saying is that a lot of people, particularly Black people, are killing themselves to be hip, to look cool, to wear the latest clothing. And what they're doing is that the capitalists The people who are only over these oil companies and everything, the reason why the prices are so high is because they're taking all of the money off the top. Capitalism. So now people have to make a choice, whether they're going to be able to drive to work, or you go to the shelves and there's no food, no bread and different items because of transportation and this ripple effect that it's having on this nation, on this society, on this world. And so it's about money. And again, if we look at it, that's where the value is being placed. My man, Thomas N. Todd, civil rights leader, one of the best civil rights attorneys that you probably ever heard of. And if you haven't heard of him, look him up. Look him up. He said, money is America's God, and America's God is money. Look at your dollar bill. Look at your $100 bill. Look at all of the references that are made. Look at who's on that dollar bill. Look at what they did. And look at what people do to earn a dollar, good, bad, and ugly. And so capitalism is really an expansion of slavery that includes other people, because other people are being exploited. They're losing their homes because of the tricky economics. We have all kind of scandals going around. Build a wall scandal. You buy a brick, that man put that money in his pocket like Bernie Madoff with all them people money. And so all I'm saying is that Black Lives Matter. Now, the movement itself, valid. Financial, fiscal responsibility, And so it's not about money. It's about your heart. It's about what your intent. It's about your deliberate efforts. It's about our social capital. We have far more social capital and the ability to change. We can bring this capitalism to its knees if we decided that we won't buy anything on any given day. And not just Black people, but since Nike and Adidas are blackballing people, go figure, blackball. Well, let's show them what it feels like. Because they're not giving back to the community. They're not doing anything, but they have people all around the world wearing sneakers that don't play basketball, that don't run track. That's what capitalism look like. You got older people like me wearing jogging suits, and I haven't jogged in years. And so that's what capitalism looks like. It has us thinking that if we can acquire something, we can place. It's American exceptionalism. If you can run a ball, dunk a ball, sing, you're valuable until you're no longer. Okay. And so that's pretty much the way I see it.
Well, you got a couple more questions. What I would do is, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time, is have you have those comments and then we funnel them back through those individuals and the group for your comments and your concerns about those particular questions. So again, I want to thank you for laying out to us a blueprint about humanity. And as the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan would say, the time and what must be done. And when we think about the time and what must be done, one thing I took away from this was that this idea of humanity has become dehumanized.
Yes, sir.
And now we look at strangers as friends and friends as strangers.
Yes, sir.
Now that's told by Dr. Bobby E. Wright at Menticide. So to understand where we are now, and I agree wholeheartedly that the youngest is the most important. That's why I'm so very glad to see the young scholars who came out tonight to hear what you had to say and the way they absorb it. And we will forever be thankful and grateful. And we will discuss this tomorrow as we move forward in, class and things of that nature. So if you want to give us your final words on your thought about particularly this particular presentation, then wrap it up any way you please. But again, we thank you so very much for your willingness to share your expertise and your time. And we really do appreciate your thoughts.
Man, if I had more time, I'd thank you more. All I can say is that I know, because I've been in your classroom, so I know what caliber of students that you're working with. And so I appreciate them. I wish I had an opportunity to engage with them. That's what I think I'm at my best. But I will say I am grateful to have the opportunity. And again, it is about uplifting humanity brother, and that's what they've done in the past, and that's what we're doing. And then we'd like to leave a legacy of love, man, you know, and help people better understand it's not anger. The anger is what's impacting us as an individual, you know, but we have to move beyond that and seek that understanding with the hope that, you know, the outcome will be better for all, you know, and not just for one particular group over the other particular group. And so, again, we're not here to appeal, to ask for any grace or any mercy. All we're saying is that help us, help you. Thank you. And again, I make this PowerPoint available. I send it in a different form so you can share with the students. And if they have some questions that they want to send to you, feel free to forward that to me, and I'll respond in kind.
There was a request for the slide deck. And Toby, before we go, for anyone who missed it, is there any way we could just put the Q&R code up for those before they leave to make sure that everybody got a chance to scan it? And again, thank you, all of you all who came out to hear Mr. Byrd's presentation. And again, this is part of what we call the Black Study Center Let Freedom Ring series. So we want to be very serious about what freedom looks like. And again, as Mr. Byrd has explained to you, particularly for those students and those young folks, we are intending with this series to rid ourselves of the folly of rituals that keeps folks who are looking to forward information to you and paid to forward information to you that's from 20, 30, 50, and 100 years ago to prepare your mind for 20, 30, and 50 years from 100 from now, because that's what the world is going to require, and you have to remain relevant. So we need to change up as those who are in positions to come in front of you about what the conversation looks like. So tonight was another installment about the most marginalized populations taking the wheel, if you will, allowing for voices to emerge that are normally frozen at the fences. And that's why we use the standpoint theory to highlight the most marginalized voices. And I think we successfully done it again. So thank you all. Good to see you, Timberly. Thank you all. And thank you, Mr. Byrd.
Great job, Professor Dixon. Hey, man, you looking sharp there, brother. I need to
stop it.
I need the number to your tailor.
1-800 discount.
Take care. God bless. And
all right.
We'll talk.
You all take care. Thank you so much. I'll make sure you get those questions.
Okay. I'll respond.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, brother. And let's talk tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.